20 questions on load balancers. 15 seconds each. Pause if you want longer. Here we go. What is the defining difference between an L4 and an L7 load balancer? How much of the request it's allowed to read. An L4 balancer sees addresses and ports and nothing else. It's moving packets, and it has no idea whether it's carrying HTTP or a database protocol. An L7 balancer terminates the connection and reads the actual request, so it knows the path, the host, the headers. Everything else that separates them falls out of that one difference. You need to route API asterisk to one service and images asterisk to another. Which layer? Layer 7, and this is the quickest test you can apply. A path lives inside the HTTP request. An L4 balancer never opens the envelope, so it has literally no way to know the difference between those two requests. Same IP, same port, same everything it can see. The rule of thumb: if your routing rule mentions any text at all, you need layer 7. What is the main advantage of an L4 load balancer? It's fast, and it works with anything. Because it doesn't pass the payload, it adds almost no latency, and it'll happily balance Postgres, Redis, a custom game protocol, whatever you throw at it. An L7 balancer has to understand your protocol to do its job. An L4 balancer's ignorance is exactly what makes it universal. Round robin sends requests to servers in turn. What is its core assumption? That your servers are identical and your requests cost the same. Both are often false. Round robin distributes the number of requests perfectly evenly, which is not the same thing as distributing load evenly at all. One request triggers a report that runs for 30 seconds, the next returns a cache string, and round robin treats them as equals. It's counting, not weighing. When does least connections clearly beat round robin? When request durations vary a lot, which is most real systems. Least connections doesn't count what it has sent, it looks at who's actually busy right now. So the server currently grinding through 3 slow uploads stops getting new work, instead of being handed its fair share regardless. It's feedback rather than a fixed rotation, and feedback wins whenever the work is uneven. What is the biggest problem with IP hash-based routing? It quietly assumes one IP means one user, and that's often badly wrong. A corporate NAT puts an entire office behind one address. A mobile carrier gateway can put a whole city behind a handful. The hash faithfully sends every one of those users to the same server, and you get a hotspot that your evenly balanced dashboard insists cannot exist. Why does consistent hashing matter when the server pool changes? Because plain hashing melts down when the pool changes. Hash modulo the number of servers, add one server, and almost every key now maps somewhere new, which means every cache is suddenly wrong at the exact moment you were scaling up because you were under load. Consistent hashing moves only about 1/10 of the keys. It's the difference between a scale-up that helps and a scale-up that causes an incident. What does sticky sessions mean and what does it cost you? It pins each user to one particular server, and the cost is that you've put state back where you spent years trying to remove it. That server now holds something no other server has, so when it dies those users don't fail over, they get logged out. And you can't rebalance freely anymore, because moving a user means losing their session. It's a genuine fix that quietly takes your stateless architecture away. A backend is up, its port is open, but it can't reach the database. Which health check catches this? An application level 1 that actually exercises the dependency. A TCP check proves only that something is listening on a port. A completely broken process can pass it forever, while the load balancer cheerfully sends it traffic. Your health endpoint needs to touch what the service genuinely needs to work. Otherwise, you've built a check that reports on the wrong thing very reliably. What's the danger of making health checks too aggressive? You get a cascade, and it's a genuinely nasty one. One server responds a bit slowly during a blip, so you pull it out. Its traffic redistributes onto the others, which are now more loaded, so they respond slowly too, so you pull them out as well. Your health checking has just methodically removed a healthy fleet. Tuned for real failure, not for a bad half second. Where does TLS termination usually happen and what does that buy you? At the load balancer, and it buys you two things. First, certificate management collapses into one place instead of every backend needing its own. Second, and this is the important one, the balancer can now read the decrypted request, which is exactly the prerequisite for any L7 routing at all. You can't route on a path you can't decrypt. What is a global server load balancer, GSLB, actually doing? It's making the decision at DNS time, before a connection exists at all. Ask for the address and you get a different answer depending on where in the world you are and which regions are currently healthy. That's a genuinely different kind of balancing from everything else in this quiz, No packets are being forwarded, you're just being told a different destination. What is the main weakness of DNS-based load balancing? You don't control who's holding your old answer. Resolvers cache, browsers cache, operating systems cache, and while you can suggest a TTL, plenty of them will happily ignore it. So failing a region over in DNS isn't a switch you flip, it's a wave that rolls through over minutes, with a stubborn tail of clients still hammering a region you took down. Why does gRPC break naive L4 load balancing? Because L4 balances connections, and gRPC barely uses any. It opens one long-lived HTTP to connection and multiplexes thousands of calls down it. So your balancer makes exactly one decision, and every call after that goes to the same backend forever. You get beautifully balanced connections and horrifically unbalanced work, which is a great illustration of what layer 4 can and can't see. What is connection draining on deploy? Stop sending new requests to that instance, but let the ones already running finish before you kill it. It sounds like a minor operational detail and it isn't. Without draining, every single deploy turns whatever was in flight into a user-visible error. It's the difference between shipping being invisible and shipping being something your users can feel. An API gateway and a reverse proxy and a load balancer walk in. What are they really? Mostly the same machine wearing different job titles. A reverse proxy that spreads traffic across backends is a load balancer. Give that same thing authentication, rate limiting, and API key management, and the industry starts calling it a gateway. The boundaries are far more about product marketing than about architecture, which is why the same Nginx binary answers to all three names. What does a load balancer fundamentally provide besides distributing load? In direction, arguably the bigger prize. Clients know one address. Behind it you can add servers, remove servers, replace every single one of them, and nothing outside ever notices. Zero downtime deploys depend on that. Autoscaling depends on that. The load spreading is what it's named after. The ability to change the fleet without telling anyone is what it's actually for. When is round robin genuinely the right choice? When its assumptions actually hold identical servers, short and similar requests. A stateless API serving mostly cached reads fits that perfectly. And in that case, round robin costs nothing to compute, tracks no state, and can't get its own bookkeeping wrong. Don't reach for something cleverer just because you've learned what round robin's weaknesses are. Check whether you have them first. Your load balancer itself is a single point of failure. What's the standard answer? Redundancy at that layer too. Usually two or more balancers sharing a floating virtual IP or health check DNS in front. And yes, there's a regress lurking here. Something has to be the last hop. Managed cloud balancers exist largely because solving this properly, with failover that actually works at 3 in the morning, is genuinely hard. A lot of what you pay for is that this problem is already handled. What single question best determines which load balancer you need? Whether your routing decisions depend on what's inside the request. That single question splits layer 4 from layer 7, and nearly every other choice follows from it. Need to route on a path, a header, a cookie? You need to read the request, so you need layer 7 and you'll pay for it in latency and protocol coupling. Don't need to read it? Then don't pay to. That's 20. If a few of those stung, good. That's the useful kind of stinging. The full load balancer episode walks through every one of them properly, and the link is below. See you in the next quiz.